The wagon wheels creaked their final revolution as Nora Thompson was pushed from the back, her 6-month-old son clutched against her chest, and the entire congregation of Eagle Pass, Texas watched in silence as Reverend Crawford declared her unfit to remain among decent Christian folk. The dust settled around her worn boots on that scorching afternoon in July of 1876, and Nora felt the weight of every judgmental stare like stones against her back. She had known this was coming ever since little Samuel was born, ever since she had refused to name his father, ever since the whispers had grown too loud for the town's self-righteous sensibilities to ignore. The Reverend's wife had been the loudest voice calling for her removal, citing scripture and moral decay, as if a woman alone with a child was somehow more sinful than the married men who beat their wives behind closed doors, or the banker who cheated widows out of their land. Nora adjusted Samuel against her hip, feeling the summer heat bearing down on them both. She had exactly $3 to her name, a carpetbag with 2 dresses and some cloth diapers, and nowhere to go. The boarding house had evicted her that morning, and her employer at the general store had terminated her position the week before when the pressure from the church ladies became too much. Eagle Pass was a town that prided itself on respectability, and she had become a stain they were determined to wash away. She started walking toward the edge of town, past the saloon where piano music tinkled inappropriately cheerful, past the livery stable where old Jerome pretended not to see her, past the land office and the telegraph station. Samuel began to fuss, hungry and hot, and she ducked into the narrow space between 2 buildings to nurse him, hiding from view like a criminal. Her hands shook as she unbuttoned her dress, and tears she had been holding back finally spilled down her cheeks. She was 22 years old, and her life felt completely over. She had loved Samuel's father, truly loved him. Thomas had been a ranch hand passing through, sweet-talking and handsome, full of promises about coming back for her after he drove the cattle to market. She had believed every word, had given herself to him completely, and then had watched him ride away with the sun gleaming off his saddle. The letter she sent to the address he gave her had come back marked as undeliverable. He had never existed the way he claimed, and she had been left to face the consequences alone. The church had offered her charity at first, conditional on her showing proper remorse and giving Samuel up for adoption to a good Christian family. Nora had refused. Whatever mistakes she had made, Samuel was innocent and he was hers. She would not abandon him to appease people who cared more about appearances than actual mercy. That refusal had sealed her fate. As evening approached, Nora found herself on the outskirts of Eagle Pass where the buildings gave way to scrubland, and the road stretched empty toward the horizon. She had no plan, no destination, just the vague idea that perhaps she could walk to the next town and find work there before word of her disgrace preceded her. It was foolish thinking. She had perhaps 15 miles before reaching the nearest settlement, and she had no water, no food, and a baby who depended entirely on her. She sat down beneath a scraggly mesquite tree and let Samuel finish nursing. The baby's dark eyes looked up at her trustingly, and she felt her heart break all over again. What had she done? How could she have been so stupid, so naive? But looking at his perfect little face, she could not bring herself to regret his existence, only the circumstances that had brought them to this desperate moment. The sound of hooves made her look up sharply. A rider was approaching from the direction of town, silhouetted against the setting sun. Nora tensed, pulling Samuel closer. She had learned to be wary of men on the road, especially now that she had no protection, no reputation left to shield her. The rider slowed as he neared, and she could make out more details. He was tall in the saddle, wearing a dust-covered hat and a dark vest over a worn shirt. A working man by the look of him, with a horse that had seen plenty of miles. He stopped a respectful distance away and dismounted, removing his hat to reveal sandy brown hair and a weathered face that suggested he was somewhere in his late 20s. "Madam," he said, his voice rough but not unkind. "Name's Preston Norris. I saw what happened in town today. Seems wrong, leaving a woman and baby out here with night coming on." Nora stiffened, pride and fear warring within her. "I do not need charity from anyone in Eagle Pass." "I am not from Eagle Pass," Preston said. "Just passing through, delivering horses to the fort. But I know injustice when I see it, and that back there was nothing but cruelty dressed up in Sunday clothes." She studied him warily. He had kind eyes, she noted, blue-gray like a winter sky, and his hands rested loosely at his sides, non-threatening. Still, she had trusted kind eyes before and paid the price. "What do you want?" she asked bluntly. Preston looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight. "I want to help if you will let me. There is a ranch about 8 miles north of here, the Double K. They are good people. The owner, Catherine Kelly, is a widow who runs the place with her sons. They might have work for you, a place to stay. I could take you there." "And what would you expect in return?" Nora asked, her voice hard. She had learned that nothing came without a price. Something like pain crossed Preston's face. "Nothing, madam. I have a sister back in Colorado. She found herself in a similar situation a few years back. Died in childbirth because she had nowhere to go, no one to help her. I swore then I would never look the other way if I could make a difference." He paused, then added quietly, "I do not expect you to trust me. But it will be dark soon, and this is not safe country for anyone alone, especially not with a baby." Nora felt something shift inside her chest. She wanted to refuse, to cling to her pride and her anger, but Samuel's survival had to matter more than her wounded dignity. She looked down at her son, then back at the cowboy who stood waiting patiently for her answer. 8 miles, she asked. "Yes, madam." "I will walk beside the horse if it makes you more comfortable. You and the baby can ride." It went against every instinct of self-preservation she had developed, but something in his demeanor convinced her he was sincere. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe desperation, but she found herself nodding. "All right," she said softly. "Thank you." Preston helped her mount his horse, a patient mare named Rosie, and arranged her carpet bag behind the saddle. He showed her how to hold Samuel securely while managing the reins, though he kept the lead rope and walked alongside as promised. As they started north into the gathering dusk, Nora felt the first small flutter of hope she had experienced in months. They walked in silence for the first mile, only the sounds of the horses' hooves and the evening insects filling the air. The temperature was dropping rapidly, as it always did in the Texas desert, and Nora was grateful for the shawl she had wrapped around Samuel. She watched Preston from the corner of her eye, noting the easy way he moved, the unconscious confidence of someone accustomed to long days outdoors. He had not asked her any prying questions, had not demanded to know her story or pass judgment on her situation. Finally, she found herself speaking. "Why did you really stop? You could have ridden past." Preston glanced up at her, his expression thoughtful. "I told you about my sister." "That is true. But I suppose the fuller truth is that I have been drifting for a long time, working ranch to ranch, never putting down roots. I have seen a lot of ugliness, a lot of people who will step over someone in need without a second thought. Gets tiring after a while, makes you wonder what the point of anything is. When I saw what they did to you today, I figured maybe I could do one decent thing, balance the scales a little bit." "Your sister," Nora said hesitantly. "What was her name?" "Margaret. She was 19. His voice carried old grief, worn smooth by time but still present. "Sweetest person you could ever meet. The man who got her in trouble was married, not that she knew it at the time. When she told him about the baby, he called her a liar and worse. Our parents had died the year before, and it was just the two of us. I was working a ranch in Wyoming, did not find out until it was too late to help." "I am sorry," Nora said, and meant it. She understood that particular flavor of helplessness, the guilt of not being able to change the unchangeable. "Yeah, well, past is past, but that little one you are holding deserves better than what this world seems intent on giving him. Figured I could at least get you somewhere safe." They continued on through the darkness, the stars beginning to emerge in the vast Texas sky. Samuel had fallen asleep against Nora's chest, his small body warm and trusting. She found herself relaxing slightly, the tension in her shoulders easing. Preston kept up a steady pace, pointing out landmarks in the moonlight so she would know the way if she ever needed to travel this road again. "The Double K is good land," he said after another stretch of silence. "Catherine Kelly is tougher than most men I have known, had to be after her husband died in a stampede 8 years back. Her sons are grown now, work the cattle with her. They run about 200 head, enough to make a decent living. Catherine has a reputation for giving people a fair shake, regardless of their circumstances. I delivered horses to her last year, and she treated me and my partner like honored guests, even though we were just hired hands doing a job. Why would she take in someone like me?" Nora asked, the bitterness creeping back into her voice. "The whole world seems to think a woman with a child and no husband is the worst kind of sinner." Preston looked up at her seriously. "Catherine Kelly buried a daughter who died of fever at age 7. She knows what it is to lose a child. I do not think she would turn away a baby who needs protection or a mother trying to survive. Besides, ranches always need help. If you can cook, clean, help with the garden or the chickens, you would be earning your keep. It would not be charity." The idea of work, of having a purpose and a place, made Nora's throat tighten with emotion. She had been a good worker at the general store, careful and honest, but that had not mattered in the end. Maybe on a ranch far from town, she could build some semblance of a life for herself and Samuel. They crested a small rise and Preston pointed ahead. "There, you can see the lights." In the distance, warm yellow light glowed from the windows of a ranch house, with the dark shapes of outbuildings scattered around it. It looked like something from a dream, that simple beacon of human habitation in the vast darkness. Nora felt tears prick her eyes again, but this time they were not entirely from despair. As they approached, dogs began to bark, and a figure emerged from the house carrying a lantern. Preston called out a greeting, and the figure resolved into a tall woman in her 50s, her dark hair streaked with silver and pulled back in a practical bun. "Preston Norris, is that you?" she called. "What brings you back this way?" "Evening, Mrs. Kelly. I have someone with me who needs help." "Could we talk inside?" Catherine Kelly raised her lantern higher, taking in Nora and the baby. Her expression shifted from curious to concerned, but not hostile. "Of course. Come in, both of you. You must be exhausted." The ranch house was simple but clean, with sturdy furniture and a large stone fireplace that currently held only embers. Catherine directed Nora to a chair near the hearth and immediately set about building up the fire and putting a kettle on for coffee. 2 young men emerged from a back room, clearly Catherine's sons. They had their mother's dark coloring and strong features. The older one looked to be about 30, the younger perhaps 25. "These are my boys, Daniel and Robert," Catherine said. "Daniel, go fetch some fresh water. Robert, there is leftover stew in the larder. Our guests need feeding." The sons moved to obey without question, clearly accustomed to their mother's authority. Catherine settled herself in a chair across from Nora and studied her with sharp but not unkind eyes. "I am Catherine Kelly, and you are welcome in my home. Why do not you tell me what has happened?" Preston spoke up first, briefly explaining what he had witnessed in Eagle Pass. Catherine's expression grew increasingly stern as he talked, and when he finished, she shook her head in disgust. "I have always said that town had more hypocrisy than Christianity, for all their Bible thumping. A child is a blessing, not a curse, regardless of the circumstances." She turned to Nora. "What is your name, girl?" "Nora Thompson. And this is Samuel." She hesitated, then added, "Everything they said about me is true. I am not married. His father is gone, and I do not know where to find him. I am not looking for pity or handouts. If there is work I can do, I will earn my way. I just need somewhere safe for my son." Catherine's expression softened. "How old are you, Nora?" 22. "And the baby?" 6 months. Catherine nodded slowly, glancing down at Samuel's sleeping face. "He is beautiful. You must love him very much to have endured what you have." The simple acknowledgement of her love for her son, spoken without judgment, nearly undid Nora completely. She blinked hard against tears and nodded, not trusting her voice. "Well then," Catherine said briskly, "here is what I propose. We always need extra hands on a ranch, especially with the summer work. I could use help in the house, the garden, the chickens, the dairy. It is hard work from dawn until dusk most days, but you would have room and board and a small wage. There is a cabin out back that we use for hired hands. It needs cleaning, but it is solid and private. You could have that for you and the boy. What do you say?" Nora could barely process what she was hearing. "You would do this, for me? You do not even know me." "I know you are a mother trying to protect her child," Catherine said firmly. "That is enough. Do we have an agreement?" "Yes," Nora whispered. "Yes, thank you. I will work hard, I promise." "I do not doubt it." Catherine rose as Daniel returned with water and Robert brought bowls of stew. "Now eat something, both of you. Preston, you will stay the night. It is too late to be riding back to town." As they ate, Nora felt the tension that had been her constant companion for months finally begin to ease. The stew was rich and savory, the coffee strong and hot, and the simple act of sitting at a table with people who treated her with basic human decency felt almost miraculous. Samuel woke and began to fuss, and Catherine immediately offered to hold him while Nora finished eating. "Oh, he is a sturdy little fellow," Catherine cooed, bouncing Samuel gently. "Look at those bright eyes. He is going to be a heartbreaker when he grows up." Preston watched this scene with an expression Nora could not quite read. There was satisfaction there, certainly, at seeing his rescue mission succeed, but something else too. Something warmer. When he caught Nora looking at him, he smiled slightly, and she found herself smiling back. After the meal, Catherine showed Nora to the cabin out back. It was a single room with a small pot-bellied stove, a bed, a table, and some shelves. Dusty and filled with cobwebs, but structurally sound as promised. "We will get this cleaned up tomorrow," Catherine said. "For tonight you can sleep in the main house. There is a room upstairs that will do just fine." But Nora shook her head. "If you have some rags and water, I can clean enough tonight. I would rather be in my own place if that is all right." Catherine smiled approvingly. "Independent. Good. I will send the boys with supplies." Within an hour, Daniel and Robert had swept out the worst of the dust and debris. Preston had gotten the stove working, and Nora had scrubbed down the bed frame and made it up with clean linens Catherine provided. It was not much, but it was hers, and that meant everything. She stood in the doorway holding Samuel, looking at her new home, and felt something perilously close to happiness. Preston appeared beside her, his saddlebags over his shoulder. I will be heading out early tomorrow before you are up. I wanted to say goodbye properly." Nora turned to him, suddenly reluctant to see him go. This man who had been a stranger a few hours ago had changed the entire trajectory of her life. "How can I ever thank you for what you have done?" "No thanks needed," Preston said quietly. "You just take care of that boy and yourself." "That is all the thanks I could want." They stood in awkward silence for a moment, the night air cool and filled with cricket song. Then, impulsively, Nora shifted Samuel to one arm and reached out to touch Preston's hand. "You are a good man, Preston Norris. Your sister would be proud of you." Something flickered in his eyes, emotion quickly hidden. He squeezed her hand gently, then stepped back. "Good night, Nora Thompson. I hope things work out well for you here. Good night." She watched him walk back toward the main house, feeling an odd sense of loss. She told herself it was ridiculous to feel anything for a man she had just met, especially after her disastrous experience with Thomas. Preston was simply a kind person who had helped her in a moment of desperate need. Nothing more. She would probably never see him again. That thought should have been neutral, but instead it made her inexplicably sad. Nora woke the next morning to sunlight streaming through the cabin window and Samuel demanding breakfast. For a moment she was disoriented, then remembered where she was and why. The Double K Ranch. Safety. A new beginning. She fed Samuel, changed him into a clean diaper, and tidied herself as best she could before venturing out to the main house. Catherine was already up, working in the kitchen, and the smell of bacon and biscuits made Nora's stomach growl. Preston was gone, she noticed immediately, though his presence seemed to linger somehow in the empty space at the table. "He left about an hour ago," Catherine said, noticing her glance. "Had to get those horses to the fort. Good man, that one. We need more like him in this world." "Yes," Nora agreed softly. "Well, no time for wool gathering. Let me show you around and explain what needs doing." The next few weeks passed in a blur of hard work. Nora threw herself into ranch life with desperate determination, needing to prove her worth. She rose before dawn to help Catherine prepare breakfast for the hands, spent her mornings working in the large vegetable garden, her afternoons helping with laundry and mending, and her evenings preparing dinner and cleaning up afterward. Samuel was passed between Catherine and Nora throughout the day, and the older woman clearly doted on the baby. "Reminds me of when my boys were small," Catherine said one afternoon, holding Samuel while Nora hung sheets on the line. "Before life got so complicated." There is something pure about a baby, is there not? Just simple needs and simple joys. Nora watched her son giggle as Catherine made silly faces at him. "He is the only good thing in my life," she admitted. "When everything else feels overwhelming, I look at him and remember why I have to keep going." Catherine's expression grew serious. "You are stronger than you know, girl. Most women would have crumbled under what you have faced. Instead, you are here working harder than some men I have known." The praise meant more than Nora could express. She had spent so long being told she was shameful, sinful, worthless. To have someone recognize her strength felt like water in the desert. The Kelly sons, Daniel and Robert, treated her with respectful distance at first. They had been raised right by their mother, with manners and consideration, but she could sense their uncertainty about how to interact with her. Daniel, the older brother, was quiet and serious, focused entirely on the ranch work. Robert was more outgoing, with an easy smile and a tendency to whistle while he worked. Over time, they both warmed to her presence, particularly after Samuel accidentally spit up on Daniel's shirt one morning and the stoic rancher had laughed instead of getting angry. "Got a good arm, little fellow," Daniel had said, wiping himself off. "You will be throwing a lasso before you know it." Nora found herself settling into a rhythm at the Double K, feeling her shoulders slowly unknot and her constant vigilance ease. No one here judged her. No one whispered behind her back or treated her like a moral failure. She was simply Nora, the woman who helped run the household, and Samuel was simply a baby who belonged there. But in the quiet moments, usually late at night when Samuel was asleep and she was alone in the cabin, her thoughts drifted to Preston Norris. She wondered where he was, what he was doing, whether he ever thought about the woman and baby he had rescued. It was foolish, she told herself. He had moved on with his life as he should. She needed to do the same. 6 weeks after Nora's arrival at the ranch, Catherine sent Robert into Eagle Pass for supplies. He returned with flour, sugar, coffee, and news that made Nora's blood run cold. "Reverend Crawford was asking about you," Robert reported, directing his words to his mother but glancing at Nora. "Wanted to know if we were harboring a fallen woman and her bastard child. I told him what you told me to say, Ma, that who we employ is none of his concern. He did not like it much." Catherine's jaw set in a hard line. "I imagine he did not. That man thinks he owns this whole county just because he stands in a pulpit on Sundays. Did he threaten anything? Not directly. But he was talking about morality and Christian duty, how decent people should not enable sin. Had a few of his church ladies with him, all nodding along like a bunch of chickens pecking corn." Nora felt sick. She had allowed herself to feel safe, and now that safety was being threatened. "I should leave," she said quietly. "I will not bring trouble to you." "You will do no such thing," Catherine said sharply. "This is my ranch, my property, and no self-righteous preacher is going to tell me how to run it. Let them talk all they want. We are 8 miles from town. They have no authority here." But Nora could see the concern in Catherine's eyes, and she knew the older woman was worried. Eagle Pass was the only town for miles. The Double K depended on it for supplies, for selling their cattle, for dozens of connections that could be disrupted if the town turned hostile. Nora had already cost one employer their livelihood. She could not bear to hurt these people who had shown her such kindness. That night, she lay awake making plans. She had saved a little money from her wages. Maybe she could take Samuel and move further west, try to disappear into one of the growing cities where a woman alone would not attract so much attention. It would be hard, perhaps impossible, but better than destroying the Kelly family's reputation. Morning came too soon, and with it, the sound of hoofbeats. Nora looked out the cabin window to see 3 riders approaching the ranch house. Her heart sank when she recognized Reverend Crawford's tall, thin figure leading them. She quickly dressed and put Samuel in the makeshift sling she used to carry him, then hurried toward the main house. Catherine was already outside, standing on the porch with her arms crossed and an expression that could cut glass. Daniel and Robert flanked her, and Nora was struck by how formidable the 3 Kellys looked standing together. "Mrs. Kelly," Reverend Crawford called out, reining in his horse. The 2 men with him, both deacons from the church, looked uncomfortable. "I am here on a matter of Christian duty. It has come to our attention that you are sheltering Nora Thompson, a woman of ill repute who has been cast out from our community for her immoral behavior. I am asking you, as a God-fearing woman, to turn her out and not support her sinful lifestyle." Catherine's eyes blazed. "Reverend, with all due respect, you can take your Christian duty and ride it back to town. This is private property, and who I employ is none of your business." The Reverend's face reddened. "It is the business of all decent people when a woman flaunts her sin without repentance. That child is a visible reminder of her fornication, and by sheltering her, you are condoning her behavior. I cannot in good conscience allow this to stand." "Cannot allow," Catherine's voice dropped to a dangerous level. "You have no power here, Reverend, none. This is my land, and I will offer sanctuary to whoever I choose. That woman has worked harder in the past month than most people work in a year. She is not flaunting anything. She is trying to survive and care for her child. If you have a problem with that, perhaps you should examine your own understanding of Christianity. One of the deacons spoke up, looking pained. Mrs. Kelly, we mean no offense, but think of your reputation in town. Think of your business relationships. If word spreads that the Double K harbors immoral women, it could affect your ability to sell your cattle to get fair prices. Is that a threat? Daniel stepped forward, his hand resting casually near the rifle he always carried. No, no, the deacon said quickly. Just stating facts. The community has standards, expectations. The community, Catherine interrupted coldly, is full of hypocrites who care more about appearances than actual compassion. I will not turn out a woman and child to appease people whose hearts are made of stone. Now, you have delivered your message. Please leave my property. Reverend Crawford's expression hardened. You will regret this decision, Mrs. Kelly. Eagle Pass is a small town. We have long memories. So do I, Reverend. So do I. And I will remember who stood by their principles and who bowed to social pressure. Now get off my land before I have my sons escort you. The Reverend yanked his horse's head around, his face tight with anger. His two companions followed, and they cantered away in a cloud of dust. Nora stood frozen near the corner of the house, holding Samuel tight, feeling as if her world was crumbling again. Catherine turned and saw her. Nora, come here. Nora approached reluctantly, shame burning through her. Mrs. Kelly, I am so sorry. I never wanted to cause you problems. I should go. You should do nothing of the sort, Catherine said firmly. She reached out and took Nora's hand. Listen to me, girl. I did not defend you back there because I am some kind of saint. I did it because it was right. Those men do not speak for God, no matter what they claim. They speak for their own narrow-minded fear. You and Samuel belong here as much as anyone. Do you understand me? Tears streamed down Nora's face. But your business, your reputation, will survive just fine. The Double K sells the best beef in 3 counties. People will buy from us because we deliver quality, not because we pass some ridiculous moral test. And if they do not, well, we will find other buyers. The world is bigger than Eagle Pass. Daniel put a hand on Nora's shoulder. Ma is right. You are part of this ranch now. We do not abandon our own. Robert nodded in agreement. Besides, I was getting tired of Eagle Pass anyway. Bunch of stuffed shirts and gossips. Nora could barely speak through her tears. These people barely knew her, yet they were willing to risk everything to protect her and Samuel. The contrast between their behavior and the so-called Christians who had cast her out could not have been sharper. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you all so much. Catherine pulled her into a brief, fierce hug. We are family here, Nora. That is what family does. The confrontation with Reverend Crawford had consequences, though not quite what anyone expected. A few of the businesses in Eagle Pass did start treating the Double K coldly, charging higher prices or making excuses for why certain items were unavailable. But others, perhaps recognizing hypocrisy when they saw it, began dealing with Catherine more openly. The owner of the feed store, a gruff man named Hank Morrison, told Robert privately that he admired Mrs. Kelly's backbone and would give them fair prices no matter what the church said. More surprisingly, 2 other women from the outskirts of town approached Catherine quietly, thanking her for standing up to the Reverend. They too had suffered under the town's rigid judgment, and seeing someone defy it gave them hope. One of them, a young widow named Clara, became a regular visitor to the ranch, forming a friendship with both Catherine and Nora. Life settled into a new normal. Summer turned to fall, and Samuel grew bigger and more alert, fascinated by everything around him. He began to smile at everyone, charming even the gruff ranch hands Catherine employed for the cattle drives. Nora found herself laughing more, the constant tension in her chest finally easing. But she still thought about Preston Norris, wondered if he knew what had resulted from his act of kindness. Wondered if he ever thought about her. The answer came on a crisp October morning when a familiar figure rode up to the ranch house, leading a string of horses. Nora was hanging laundry, Samuel playing on a blanket at her feet, when she heard the hoofbeats. She looked up and felt her heart do something strange in her chest. Preston looked exactly as she remembered, though perhaps a bit more weathered, his face showing the effects of months on the trail. He dismounted and spoke briefly with Catherine, who had come out to greet him. Then his eyes scanned the area until they found Nora. The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise. He started walking toward her, and Nora found herself frozen, laundry forgotten in her hands. Samuel saw the stranger approaching and made a gurgling sound, waving his chubby arms. "Hello, Nora," Preston said when he reached her. His voice was rough, as if he had not used it much recently. "I was hoping you would still be here." "Preston," she managed. "I did not think I would see you again." "I did not think I would be back this way so soon," he admitted. "But I took a job with a horse trader, and our route brings us through here every few months. When I heard about the trouble with the Reverend, I had to make sure you were all right." Nora felt a warmth spread through her chest. He had come back, not just passing through, but specifically to check on her. "We are fine, more than fine. The Kellys have been wonderful." Preston crouched down beside Samuel, who watched him with wide, curious eyes. "He has gotten big." "Look at you, little man. Bet you do not remember me, do you?" Samuel reached out and grabbed Preston's finger, holding it with surprising strength. Preston laughed, a genuine sound of delight, and Nora felt something shift irrevocably inside her. "Can you stay for a while?" she asked, trying to keep her voice casual. "Or do you need to keep moving?" "I have a couple of days. Catherine already invited me to stay in the bunkhouse." He stood, still looking at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I would like to spend some time with you if that would be all right. Catch up properly." "I would like that too," Nora said softly. Over the next 2 days, Preston became a constant presence around the ranch. He helped Daniel and Robert with some fence repairs, traded horse stories with Catherine, and spent every spare moment with Nora and Samuel. They talked for hours, sharing stories about their lives, their hopes, their fears. Preston told her about growing up in Colorado, about losing his parents young, about the wandering life he had led since Margaret's death. "I have never felt settled anywhere," he confessed one evening as they sat on the porch steps watching the sunset. Samuel was asleep in Nora's arms, his head nestled against her shoulder. "Always felt like I was looking for something but never quite finding it, like there was supposed to be more to life than just drifting from job to job." "Have you found it yet?" Nora asked quietly. "That's something more." Preston looked at her, and the expression in his eyes made her heart race. "Maybe I have." The air between them felt charged with possibility. Nora wanted to lean into him, to close the distance, but fear held her back. She had been hurt so badly before, her trust shattered. What if she was misreading the situation? What if Preston was just being kind and she was attaching feelings that he did not share? As if sensing her uncertainty, Preston reached out and gently touched her cheek. "Nora, I need to say something, and I hope I am not speaking out of turn. These past months I have not been able to stop thinking about you, about Samuel, about whether you were safe, whether you were happy. I told myself it was just concern, just wanting to know my good deed had worked out. But that is not the whole truth." "What is the whole truth?" Nora whispered. The truth is that I have been falling in love with you since the moment I saw you sitting under that mesquite tree, holding your baby and refusing to give up despite everything. You are the strongest, most incredible woman I have ever met. And Samuel, he is an amazing little boy. You both deserve everything good this world can offer. Tears filled Nora's eyes. Preston, wait, let me finish. I know you have been hurt. I know you have no reason to trust another man with pretty words, but I am not just passing through this time. I talked to Catherine yesterday. She said if I want to stay on here, work the ranch permanently, there is a place for me. I am tired of drifting, Nora. I want to put down roots, and if you are willing, I would like to do that here with you. Nora's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst. Are you saying what I think you are saying? Preston took a deep breath. I am saying I love you. I am saying that boy in your arms deserves a father who will stand by him, protect him, give him his name. I am saying I want to court you properly, do this right. And when enough time has passed that you trust me, that you know I mean every word, I want to marry you. I want to be Samuel's father. I want us to be a family. The tears spilled over, running down Nora's cheeks. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, to grab onto this chance for happiness with both hands. But the wounded part, the part that had been betrayed and abandoned, needed to be sure. I want that too, she said carefully. More than you know, but Preston, I need time. I need to know this is real, that you will not change your mind or disappear. I cannot survive being left again. Samuel cannot survive it. I understand, Preston said seriously. Take all the time you need. I am not going anywhere. I will be right here, proving myself every single day until you believe me. He leaned forward and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead, then to Samuel's sleeping head. I promise you both, on my life, I will never abandon you. That child will have my name if you will let him. He will grow up knowing he is loved and wanted. You both will. Nora closed her eyes, letting herself feel the impossible hope blooming in her chest. Maybe, just maybe, life could be beautiful after all. True to his word, Preston stayed at the Double K Ranch. Catherine hired him officially, and he threw himself into ranch work with the same dedication he brought to everything else. He was good with horses, excellent with cattle, and tireless in his efforts. Daniel and Robert accepted him quickly, recognizing a hard worker and an honest man when they saw one. But more importantly, he courted Nora with patience and genuine affection. He never pushed, never demanded more than she was ready to give. Instead, he showed up every day, steady and reliable. He brought her flowers from the prairie, helped her with heavy chores, played with Samuel for hours, making the baby laugh with silly faces and gentle games. He listened when she talked, remembered details she mentioned, and supported her without trying to control her. Slowly, painfully slowly, Nora felt her defenses crumbling. Preston was nothing like Thomas. Where Thomas had been all flash and empty promises, Preston was substance and follow-through. Where Thomas had disappeared at the first sign of consequence, Preston had shown up specifically to face consequences alongside her. 3 months after Preston's return, on a cold January evening in 1877, they stood together watching Samuel take his first wobbly steps. The baby tottered 3 paces before falling on his bottom, then looked up with such pride that both adults burst into laughter. "Did you see that?" Nora exclaimed, scooping Samuel up and spinning him around. "You walked. You clever, wonderful boy." Preston was grinning like a fool, his eyes suspiciously bright. "He is going to be running before we know it. We will not be able to keep up with him." Nora noticed his word choice. "We, not you. Always we. Always including himself in Samuel's life, in their future." The realization settled over her like a warm blanket. "Preston," she said, setting Samuel down to play with his wooden blocks, I need to tell you something." His expression grew serious, attentive. "All right." Nora took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "When you first said you loved me, that you wanted to be part of our lives, I was terrified. I had been abandoned and betrayed, and I did not think I could ever trust anyone again. But you have been here, day after day, showing me through your actions what your words mean. You have been a father to Samuel in every way that matters. You have been a partner to me, a friend, someone I can depend on." Preston's throat worked as he swallowed hard. "Nora, I am not finished," she said with a shaky smile. "What I am trying to say is that I trust you now, completely. And I love you, Preston Norris. I think I started loving you that first night when you walked beside your horse for 8 miles just to keep me safe. I fought it for a long time, but I cannot fight it anymore. I love you and I want everything you offered. I want to marry you. I want Samuel to have your name. I want us to be a family." For a moment, Preston just stared at her, and Nora felt a flicker of panic. Then he moved, crossing the distance between them in 2 strides and pulling her into his arms. His kiss was gentle but fierce, full of months of restrained longing and infinite tenderness. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Preston rested his forehead against hers. "You mean it. You really mean it." "I really mean it," Nora confirmed. "I want to marry you." Preston let out a whoop of joy that made Samuel look up in surprise, then laugh at the sight of the adults dancing around the cabin. He picked up both Nora and Samuel, spinning them in a circle until they were all dizzy and laughing. "We are going to be a family," Preston kept saying, wonder in his voice. "A real family." That night, after Samuel was asleep, they sat together planning their future. Preston wanted to marry quickly but properly. He wanted Nora to have a real wedding, something that would make their union official and undeniable. Catherine was delighted when they told her the news, immediately offering to host the wedding at the ranch and inviting everyone she knew who had decent hearts, pointedly excluding Eagle Pass's judgmental congregation. "We can have it in the spring," Catherine said, already making mental lists. "The wildflowers will be blooming and it will be beautiful. Oh, I am so happy for you both. You deserve this joy." But Preston shook his head. "With respect, Mrs. Kelly, I do not want to wait until spring. I want Samuel to have my name as soon as possible. I want the whole world to know that boy is mine, that Nora is mine, that we are a family. Is there any way we could do it sooner?" Catherine studied him, then smiled. "You are a good man, Preston Norris. Better than most I have known. All right, if you want it sooner, we will make it happen." "How about 2 weeks? That will give us time to prepare properly, but not leave you waiting forever." 2 weeks later, on a sunny February morning, Nora Thompson became Nora Norris. The ceremony was held in the front yard of the Double K Ranch, with a traveling preacher, Catherine knew, performing the service. Clara and several other women from the outskirts of town attended, along with a handful of ranch hands and neighboring families who cared more about character than reputation. Nora wore a simple blue dress that Catherine had helped her make, with wildflowers in her hair. Preston wore his best clothes, cleaned and pressed, his hair neatly combed and his face shining with happiness. Samuel, now 9 months old, was held by Catherine during the ceremony, occasionally babbling and adding his own commentary to the proceedings. When the preacher asked if anyone objected to the union, a voice called out from the road. Everyone turned to see Reverend Crawford sitting on his horse, his face pinched with disapproval. "I object," he announced. "This woman is a sinner. That child is a bastard. This mockery of a wedding is an affront to Christian values." Before anyone else could respond, Preston walked calmly toward the Reverend. His hands were loose at his sides, but there was steel in his eyes and his voice. "Reverend, you are on private property and you were not invited." This is my wedding day, and that woman there is about to become my wife. That child is my son. If you have a problem with that, I suggest you take it up with God, because I have no interest in your opinion. Now you can leave peacefully, or I can help you leave. Your choice." The Reverend's face turned purple, but something in Preston's demeanor must have convinced him not to push further. He yanked his horse around and rode off, leaving a trail of dust and impotent fury. Preston returned to Nora's side, taking her hand. "Where were we?" The preacher, trying not to smile, cleared his throat. "I believe I was about to pronounce you husband and wife." When he did, and Preston kissed Nora to seal their vows, the small gathering erupted in applause. Samuel contributed his own happy shriek, making everyone laugh. But the most important moment came afterward, when Preston knelt before Catherine, holding Samuel. "I, Preston Norris, claim this boy as my son. From this day forward, he will be Samuel Norris, bearing my name and my protection. He will be raised as my own, loved as my own, and given every advantage I can provide. I swear this before all these witnesses." It was not quite a legal adoption. The paperwork for that would come later, but it was a binding oath in the eyes of everyone present. Samuel was no longer a child without a father. He was Preston Norris's son, and everyone there would testify to it. Nora wept openly as Preston stood and handed Samuel to her, then wrapped his arms around them both. Her family. Her actual, real family. After everything she had endured, all the pain and shame and fear, she had somehow found her way to this moment of perfect happiness. The celebration afterward was joyful and boisterous. Catherine had prepared a feast, and there was music and dancing. Daniel surprised everyone by producing a fiddle and playing beautifully, while Robert sang in a clear tenor. Preston danced with Nora, careful and attentive, whispering promises and endearments in her ear between songs. "I am going to spend the rest of my life making you happy," he murmured. "You and Samuel both. That is my purpose now, my reason for everything." "You already make us happy," Nora replied, resting her head on his shoulder. "Just by being here, just by being you." As the sun set on their wedding day, Preston and Nora retreated to the cabin, which Catherine had decorated with flowers and new curtains. Samuel fell asleep quickly, exhausted by the excitement, and they tucked him into his small bed in the corner. Then, finally alone, Preston pulled Nora into his arms. "Mrs. Norris," he said softly, "I like the sound of that." "So do I," Nora whispered. "I never thought I could have this, a husband, a family, respect." "You always deserved it," Preston said fiercely. "What happened to you before, that was not your fault. You loved someone who did not deserve your love, and he failed you. But I will never fail you, Nora. I swear on everything I hold sacred." She believed him. Finally, completely, she believed him. And when he kissed her, tender and passionate and full of promise, she kissed him back with all the love and trust she had to give. Their first year of marriage was not without challenges, but they faced them together. Eagle Pass continued to be hostile, with Reverend Crawford preaching sermons about moral decay and Catherine Kelly's ranch being a den of iniquity. But his words had less power now. Other towns existed, other markets, and the double K-T-K's reputation for quality remained intact despite the Reverend's best efforts. More importantly, the community of people who mattered, who had actual compassion and decency, rallied around the Norris family. Clara brought baby clothes Samuel had outgrown and gossip from town, carefully curated to be more amusing than hurtful. Hank Morrison at the feed store always had a kind word and fair prices. Even some members of Reverend Crawford's own congregation began quietly defying him, nodding politely to Nora when they encountered her and admitting, in private conversations, that perhaps the Reverend had gone too far. Preston proved to be everything he had promised. He was a devoted husband, attentive and affectionate, always putting Nora's needs alongside his own. He was an incredible father to Samuel, patient when the toddler was fussy, playful when he needed entertainment, protective without being overbearing. Samuel's first word was "Papa," directed at Preston, and the look of pure joy on Preston's face made Nora cry happy tears. The Double K thrived under the combined efforts of the Kelly family and Preston. The ranch expanded its holdings, bought more cattle, improved its facilities. Catherine divided the property, giving Daniel the northern section, Robert the southern, and surprisingly offering Preston and Nora a portion of the eastern land as a wedding gift. "You are family," Catherine said when Preston protested the generosity. "This ranch succeeds because we all work together. You have earned your place here, both of you. Besides, I want Samuel to have a legacy, something to inherit. That boy is going to need land when he grows up and wants to make his own way." So Preston and Nora began building their own small ranch house on their parcel of land, working on it in their spare time. It was hard work, but satisfying. They designed it together, planning for the future, for the family they hoped to have. That future began to take shape in the winter of 1877, when Nora realized she was pregnant. She told Preston on a snowy evening as they sat by the fire in their cabin, Samuel playing with wooden animals at their feet. "I have something to tell you," she said, her voice nervous but excited. Preston looked up from the harness he was mending. "What is it?" "We are going to have a baby. You are going to be a father, again, or for the first time, biologically, I mean," she laughed at her own stammering. "I am pregnant, Preston." He stared at her for a long moment, then carefully set down the harness. "A baby. We are having a baby." "Yes. I think I am about 3 months along." Preston's face went through a series of emotions too quickly to identify, then settled on profound joy. He pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. "A baby, our baby. Nora, this is incredible. I am going to be a father from the very beginning this time. I get to experience everything with you." "You were Samuel's father from the beginning too," Nora reminded him gently. "Being there for the birth does not matter as much as being there for the life." "I know," Preston said, "and I will be, for all of them. Samuel and this new little one and however many others we have. I am never going anywhere, Nora. This is my life. You are my life." When they told Samuel he was going to be a big brother, the 3-year-old looked confused, then delighted. "Baby?" he asked, patting Nora's stomach. "Baby in there." "That is right," Preston said, crouching down to Samuel's level. "In a few months you are going to have a little brother or sister. Someone to play with and look after. Are you excited?" Samuel nodded vigorously, then ran off to tell Catherine the news in his own garbled toddler language. The entire ranch celebrated, treating the pregnancy as the blessing it was. Nora's pregnancy progressed smoothly, though she worked right up until the final weeks, insisting she was not fragile. Catherine and Clara fussed over her, making sure she ate enough and rested when needed. Preston became almost comically protective, hovering and worrying until Nora had to gently remind him she had done this before. "Samuel's birth was hard because I was alone and terrified," she told him. "This time I have you. I have Catherine and Clara and a real midwife coming. I am going to be fine." "I know," Preston said, but the worry did not entirely leave his eyes. He had lost his sister to childbirth. That fear lurked in the background of his excitement. In August of 1878, on a hot summer night, Nora went into labor. Preston sent Daniel racing for the midwife while he stayed by Nora's side, holding her hand and murmuring encouragement. Catherine managed the household, keeping Samuel occupied and making sure everything Nora needed was readily available. The labor was long but not complicated. As dawn broke, casting pink and gold light through the window, Nora gave birth to a healthy baby boy. The midwife cleaned him up and placed him in Nora's arms, and she stared down at the tiny red face with overwhelming love. "He is perfect," she whispered. Preston, who had been pale and tense throughout the entire ordeal, finally relaxed. He sat beside Nora on the bed, wrapping his arm around her shoulders and looking at their son with wonder. "He has your nose," Preston said softly. "He has your stubborn chin," Nora countered. They decided to name him Peter after Preston's father. When Samuel was finally allowed in to meet his baby brother, he approached cautiously, then gently touched Peter's tiny hand. "Baby," Samuel announced with satisfaction. "My baby." "That is right," Preston said. "Your baby brother. You are going to help us take care of him, right?" Samuel nodded seriously, already taking his role as big brother to heart. Life settled into a new rhythm with 2 children. Samuel helped as much as a 3-year-old could, fetching diapers and singing to Peter when he cried. Preston divided his time between ranch work and family, always making sure to give both Samuel and Peter individual attention. Nora juggled motherhood and her responsibilities on the ranch, supported by Catherine and the growing network of friends they had built. The new ranch house was completed when Peter was 6 months old, and the family moved in with great ceremony. It was modest but sturdy, with 3 bedrooms, a proper kitchen, and a front porch where they could sit and watch the sunset. Preston carried Nora over the threshold, mindful of the baby in her arms, while Samuel ran ahead exploring every corner. "This is ours," Preston said, setting Nora down gently. "Our home, our land, our life, everything we have built together." Nora looked around at the house, at her husband, at her 2 beautiful sons. "I never imagined I could have this," she admitted. "When I was sitting under that mesquite tree, alone and terrified, this seemed impossible. But you gave it to me. You gave us this life." "We gave it to each other," Preston corrected. "You had the strength to survive. I just had the good sense to recognize something precious when I saw it." Over the next several years, their family continued to grow. A daughter, Patricia, was born in 1880, with Nora's dark hair and Preston's gray-blue eyes. Then another son, Paul, in 1882, completing their family of 6. The ranch prospered, their land producing good cattle and better children. Samuel grew into a responsible boy who adored his siblings and took his role as oldest seriously. Peter was adventurous and fearless, always getting into trouble. Patricia was clever and determined, already showing signs of inheriting Catherine's business sense. Paul was still a baby, but showed every sign of being sweet-natured and gentle. Eagle Pass eventually moved on to other scandals, other targets for their judgment. Reverend Crawford passed away in 1883, and his replacement was a younger man with more compassionate views. Some of the people who had shunned Nora actually apologized, though she accepted their words with polite distance. She had not forgotten how quickly they had turned on her in her time of need. But she had also learned that forgiveness was not about excusing cruelty, but about not letting that cruelty define her life. She was happy, genuinely happy, with a husband who loved her and children who brought joy to every day. The opinions of people who had judged her no longer mattered. Catherine Kelly remained a constant presence in their lives, having gained 4 grandchildren in spirit if not in blood. She taught Samuel to ride, Patricia to manage accounts, and spoiled all of them equally. Daniel and Robert married eventually, bringing their own wives and children into the extended family, and the Double K became a thriving multi-generational enterprise. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Preston surprised Nora by taking her to the spot where they had first met. The mesquite tree was still there, gnarled and stubborn, surviving in the harsh landscape. They stood together in its minimal shade, holding hands. 10 years ago, I saw a woman who refused to give up, Preston said quietly, who held her baby and faced the world alone. I knew in that moment that I was looking at someone extraordinary. 10 years ago, I saw a stranger who offered kindness when I expected judgment, Nora replied, who changed the entire course of my life with a simple act of decency. I did not think I would ever trust anyone again, but you taught me that good men exist. Preston pulled her close, kissing her forehead. That child will have my name, I told myself. That woman will never be alone again if I have anything to say about it. Best decision I ever made. Samuel is 14 now, Nora said. Almost a man himself. Sometimes I look at him and cannot believe how far we have come. He does not remember Eagle Pass or being cast out. He just knows he is Samuel Norris, son of Preston and Nora, big brother to 3. That is his whole identity. That is all he needs to know, Preston agreed. His mother is strong and loving. His father chose him deliberately and loves him completely. Everything else is just history. They stood there as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Two people who had found each other in the worst moment and built something beautiful from the ruins. Behind them, their children played in the dirt, laughing and arguing and being perfectly normal. The years continued to pass in the way years do, marked by harvests and birthdays, challenges and triumphs. Samuel grew into a fine young man, responsible and hardworking, with Preston's steady nature and Nora's resilient spirit. He went to work on the ranch full-time at 16, proving himself capable and mature. Several young women in the area expressed interest, but Samuel was cautious, perhaps having absorbed his mother's hard-learned lessons about choosing carefully. Peter was wilder, always pushing boundaries and seeking adventure. He talked about joining a cattle drive to see the country, or maybe even heading to one of the new cities springing up out west. Preston and Nora worried about him but tried to give him space to figure out his own path. Patricia was sharp as a tack, helping Catherine with the business aspects of the ranch and showing a natural talent for negotiation. By age 12, she could calculate profit margins in her head and knew more about cattle markets than most grown men. Robert joked that she would probably end up owning half of Texas before she was 30. Paul was the gentle one, more interested in books and learning than ranch work. He loved animals, though, and had a gift for healing injured creatures. A bird with a broken wing, a calf struggling to nurse, a dog with a thorn in its paw. Paul handled them all with patient care. Preston and Nora recognized that he might not be destined for ranch life, and they started saving money to send him to school, maybe even to become a veterinarian. In 1887, when Samuel was 17, he came to Preston with serious questions about his biological father. It was bound to happen eventually, and Preston had prepared himself for this conversation. They sat on the porch of the ranch house, watching the stars emerge as night fell. Samuel was quiet for a long time before speaking. "Pa, I need to know about the man who fathered me, not because I am looking for him or because you are not my real father. You are. You have always been, but I need to understand where I came from." Preston took a deep breath. "Your mother can tell you more than I can, son. I never met the man, but I will tell you what I know, what she told me over the years." He recounted the story as gently as possible. Thomas, the ranch hand, the promises made and broken, the letter that came back undeliverable. Samuel listened without interrupting, his face unreadable in the darkness. "So he abandoned her," Samuel said finally. "Abandoned us both." Yes, and it was his loss, Samuel, his tremendous loss. He missed out on knowing an incredible woman and an even more incredible son. Samuel was silent again, processing. Then he said, I do not want to find him. I do not even want to know his last name. He gave up any right to be part of my life when he rode away. You are my father. You have been since before I can remember. That is all that matters to me. Preston felt emotion clog his throat. You have no idea what it means to hear you say that. It is the truth, Samuel said simply. Ma has told me stories about how you claimed me, how you gave me your name even though you did not have to. That is what makes a father, not blood, choice. You chose me and you keep choosing me every day. I am proud to be Samuel Norris. I would not want any other name. They sat together in comfortable silence, father and son in every way that mattered. Eventually, Nora came out to join them and Samuel hugged her tight. Thank you for never giving up on me, he said. Even when the whole world turned against you, you held on. You are the strongest person I know. Nora cried, of course, but they were happy tears. Her son knew he was loved. That was all she had ever wanted. Life on the ranch continued its steady rhythm. Droughts came and went. Cattle were born and sold. Seasons turned. In 1889, Samuel met a young woman named Elizabeth at a church social in the next town over. She was a schoolteacher, smart and kind, with a practical nature that appealed to Samuel's own sensibility. He courted her properly, bringing her to meet the family, and Preston and Nora watched with delight as their oldest son fell in love. The wedding took place in the spring of 1890, and it was a grand affair. The Double K had grown prosperous enough to host a significant celebration, and people came from miles around. Samuel, 20 years old and confident, stood at the altar with Elizabeth and promised to love her for the rest of his life. Preston stood beside him as best man, his heart full of pride. During the reception, Nora and Preston danced together, watching their son celebrate his new marriage. We did it, Nora said softly. We raised him. He is a good man. He is a great man, Preston corrected. But yes, we did it, together. Do you ever regret it? Nora asked. Taking on a woman with a baby, dealing with all the judgment and difficulty. Preston pulled back to look at her incredulously. Regret you. Regret our life. Nora, you and the children are the best thing that ever happened to me. I was nobody before I met you, just drifting with no purpose. You gave me everything that matters. She smiled, the same smile that had captivated him years ago. I love you, Preston Norris. I love you too, Nora Norris. Every day more than the day before. More grandchildren followed. Samuel and Elizabeth had 3 children in quick succession. And suddenly, Preston and Nora were grandparents, watching the next generation begin their own journeys. Peter eventually settled down as well, marrying a rancher's daughter from a neighboring county. Patricia became involved in local politics, fighting for women's rights and better education, though she swore she would never marry, claiming she had more important things to do. Paul went off to school in Austin to study veterinary medicine, making everyone proud. Catherine Kelly passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1895, surrounded by her family. Her funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives she had touched. Preston and Nora grieved deeply, having lost the woman who had given them a chance when no one else would. But they also celebrated her life, knowing she had lived fully and made a real difference in the world. The Double K was divided among Daniel, Robert, and Preston's families, with each maintaining their own operations while supporting each other. The Norris portion of the ranch thrived under Preston and Nora's careful management, and eventually under Samuel's leadership as he took on more responsibility. As Preston and Nora entered their 50s, they began to slow down a bit, letting the younger generation handle more of the heavy work. They took time to sit on their porch and watch the sunsets, to visit their children and grandchildren, to simply enjoy the life they had built together. One evening in 1902, 25 years after their wedding, they sat together on that porch with their grandchildren playing in the yard. Samuel's oldest son was 10 now, eerily similar to how Samuel had been at that age. Peter's twin daughters were causing cheerful chaos. Patricia occasionally visited with neighborhood children she was tutoring. Paul brought injured animals home during school breaks, treating them with careful skill. "Can you believe this is our life?" Nora asked, leaning against Preston's shoulder. "Sometimes I still think I am going to wake up under that mesquite tree, alone and hopeless." "This is real," Preston assured her. "All of it. Every beautiful, chaotic, perfect bit of it. We are going to be grandparents 7 times over by next spring," Nora marveled. 7 grandchildren, from a woman who was once told she was unfit to be part of society. "Society was wrong," Preston said firmly. "You were never unfit. You were just ahead of your time, strong enough to stand alone when you had to. But you do not have to stand alone anymore. You have me, and our children, and our grandchildren, and friends and family stretching across 3 counties. You built that, Nora. You and your refusal to give up." She turned to kiss him, a gentle press of lips that still sent warmth through her body after all these years. "We built it together. I could never have done any of this without you. Partners," Preston said, as he had said countless times over the years, "now and always." As the sun set over the Texas landscape, painting everything in shades of gold and amber, Preston and Nora Norris sat surrounded by the life they had created. A life built from the ashes of rejection and judgment, from a moment of kindness on a dusty road, from a cowboy who saw a woman in need and said, "That child will have my name." Samuel, now a respected rancher and father himself, joined them on the porch with his wife Elizabeth. They brought fresh coffee and sat down, continuing the family tradition of evening conversations. "Pa, Ma," Samuel said, "Elizabeth and I have been talking. We want to expand our operation, maybe buy the Henderson property to the east, but we wanted to get your blessing first." Preston and Nora exchanged a smile. Their son had grown into exactly the kind of man they had hoped he would be, strong but thoughtful, ambitious but considerate of others. "You do not need our blessing," Preston said. "You are a grown man with your own family and your own ranch." "But you have it anyway. What do you think, Nora?" "I think our son has good instincts," Nora said warmly. "And I think the Henderson property would be perfect for expansion. You should do it." Samuel grinned. "Thank you. I wanted to honor everything you taught me about making decisions together, about family being the foundation of everything." After Samuel and Elizabeth left, Preston pulled Nora close. "We did good," he said simply. "Yes," Nora agreed. "We did." The years continued to unfold, each one bringing new joys and occasional sorrows, as life always does. Preston and Nora grew older together, their hair turning gray, their steps slowing, but their love remaining as strong as ever. They celebrated their 30th anniversary in 1907, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, a testament to the family they had built from nothing. Peter had become a successful cattle trader, traveling across the West, but always returning home. Patricia had become a fierce advocate for women's suffrage, giving speeches and organizing rallies, making her parents proud with her passion and conviction. Paul had established a veterinary practice in Eagle Pass itself, ironically returning to the town that had once cast his mother out. He treated animals with skill and compassion, and the people of Eagle Pass respected him, many not even knowing the history of his family. Eagle Pass itself had changed. The harsh judgment of earlier decades had softened. The new generation was more tolerant, less concerned with rigid morality and more focused on practical matters. When Paul opened his practice there, several old-timers approached Nora to apologize for how she had been treated. Some of those apologies were sincere. Others seemed more about assuaging guilt, but Nora accepted them all with grace. "Holding on to anger would only poison my own happiness," she told Preston. "I have built too good a life to let bitterness ruin it now." In 1910, Preston fell ill with pneumonia during a harsh winter. For a week, his life hung in the balance and Nora barely left his side. She held his hand, whispered prayers and encouragements, and refused to accept that she might lose him. Their children gathered, worried and scared, but trying to stay strong for their mother. Preston pulled through, though it left him weakened. As he recovered, Nora nursed him with fierce devotion, just as he had cared for her through pregnancies and illnesses over the years. "You are not leaving me yet, Preston Norris," she told him firmly. "We have more years together. I am not finished with you." Preston, still weak but improving, managed a smile. "Yes, madam, I would not dare disobey." His recovery took months, but he did recover, though he could no longer work the ranch as he once had. Instead, he focused on teaching his grandchildren, passing on skills and stories, making sure they knew their family history. He told them about finding their grandmother under a mesquite tree, about how she had been the bravest person he had ever met. He told them about giving Samuel his name, about building the ranch, about all the years of love and work and triumph. The grandchildren listened, fascinated, learning that their family's story was one of resilience and redemption. Samuel took over full management of the ranch, with his brothers and sister supporting in various ways. The Norris name was now synonymous with quality cattle and honest dealing throughout the region. Everything Preston and Nora had worked for had come to fruition, their legacy secured in the next generations. On a warm spring evening in 1916, Preston and Nora sat on their porch as they had thousands of times before. They were both in their 60s now, grandparents many times over, their bodies weathered by years of hard work and Texas sun. But they still held hands, still found comfort in each other's presence. "40 years," Preston said softly. "40 years since I saw you under that tree." 39 years of marriage," Nora added. "More than half my life with you." "The best years," Preston said. "Every single one of them." Nora leaned her head on his shoulder. "Do you remember what you said to me? The very first time we talked?" "I said a lot of things that night." "You said that child will have my name. That was your promise, and you kept it. Samuel has your name, your values, your strength. He has passed all of that to his children. Our great-grandchildren carry the Norris name into the future." Preston felt tears prick his eyes. "I meant every word. That boy deserved a father. You deserved a partner. I just did what was right." "You did more than what was right," Nora corrected gently. "You gave us everything. A home, a family, respect, love. You turned the worst moment of my life into the beginning of something beautiful." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the sky in brilliant colors. In the distance, they could see Samuel working with his sons, teaching them about cattle and land management. Peter's children were visiting, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. Patricia had brought her newest proteges, young women she was mentoring in political activism. Paul had stopped by earlier with a wounded hawk he was nursing back to health. "We did it," Preston said quietly. "We built something that will outlast us, something good and true." "We did," Nora agreed. "Together." Preston stood slowly, his joints protesting, and pulled Nora to her feet. He held her close, swaying gently to music only they could hear, dancing in the gathering dusk. "I love you, Nora Norris," he whispered. Every day, every moment with everything I am. I love you too, Nora replied. My cowboy, my hero, my husband, my everything. They danced there on the porch, two people who had found each other in the worst circumstances and built a love story that would echo through generations. A woman who had been cast out for bearing a child alone, and the cowboy who had said that child will have my name. And he did. Samuel Norris, along with Peter, Patricia, and Paul. All of them bearing their father's name proudly, passing it to their own children, creating a legacy of love and strength that would endure long after Preston and Nora were gone. As the stars began to emerge in the vast Texas sky, Preston and Nora finally stopped dancing. They stood together, arms around each other, looking out at the land they had built their life upon. No regrets, Nora asked one final time. Not a single one, Preston confirmed. This is everything I ever wanted. You are everything I ever wanted. Me too, Nora whispered. Me too. They turned and walked into their house together, hand in hand, as they had done every night for nearly 40 years. Behind them, the land stretched out in darkness, but inside the light was warm and welcoming. Their home, their life, their happily ever after, earned through courage and kindness and unwavering love. The story that had begun with rejection and despair had transformed into something magnificent. A family built not just on blood, but on choice. On a cowboy who had seen injustice and refused to look away. On a woman who had loved her child enough to endure anything. On two people who had found each other and held on through every storm. Preston and Nora Norris lived many more years, watching their family grow and flourish. They celebrated birthdays and weddings, welcomed new babies and grieved losses, supported their children's dreams and delighted in their grandchildren's achievements. Every day was a gift, every moment together precious. When Preston finally passed away in his sleep in 1925 at the age of 76, with Nora beside him holding his hand, he left behind a legacy that had nothing to do with cattle or land or money. His legacy was love. The love he had shown to a desperate woman and her baby on a dusty Texas road. The love he had given his family every single day of his life. The love that had transformed shame into pride, despair into hope, and loneliness into belonging. Nora lived 5 more years, surrounded always by children and grandchildren who adored her. She told them stories about their grandfather, about the early days on the Double K, about building a life from nothing. She made sure they understood that strength was not just about enduring hardship, but about choosing kindness when the world chose judgment. When she passed peacefully in 1930, she was buried beside Preston under the shade of the cottonwood trees they had planted together decades earlier. Their graves were marked with simple stones bearing their names and the inscription, "Together, now and always." The Norris family continued to thrive in Texas, generation after generation, carrying forward the values Preston and Nora had instilled. They remembered the story of their ancestors, the woman who had been cast out and the cowboy who had given her child his name. It became a family legend, told and retold, a reminder that love and courage can triumph over any adversity. And somewhere in Texas, under an old mesquite tree, the spot where Preston first saw Nora remained, unmarked but significant. A place where two lives had intersected and changed forever. Where a simple act of kindness had sparked a love story that would echo through time. A story of rejection and redemption, of judgment and justice, of a woman who refused to give up and a man who refused to look away. A story that proved that family is not just about who gives you life, but about who chooses to walk through life beside you. A story that demonstrated that the most powerful force in the world is not wealth or status or social approval, but love given freely and without condition. The Wild West was a harsh place, full of rough justice and rougher living. But it was also a place where new beginnings were possible, where the past could be left behind, and where a person's worth was measured by their actions rather than their circumstances. Preston and Nora had embodied the best of that frontier spirit, the courage to stand against injustice, and the determination to build something lasting and good. Their great-great-grandchildren would eventually spread across the country, carrying the Norris name to new places and new adventures. But they all knew their history, knew about the brave woman and the kind cowboy who had started it all. They carried that knowledge like a gift, a reminder that they came from people who had faced the worst and created something beautiful. And that is the true end of this story. Not with death, but with life continuing, flourishing, growing. A happily ever after that extended far beyond the two people who started it, touching countless lives in ways big and small. Preston's promise, spoken so long ago under a desert sky, had been kept in every way that mattered. That child did have his name. Samuel Norris and his children and their children and their children after them. All of them bearing the name of a cowboy who saw injustice and chose love. All of them descendants of a woman who refused to let the world defeat her. It was a good name to carry. A name built on honor and compassion, on strength and tenderness, on every quality that makes a person truly noble. Preston and Nora had given their children and grandchildren many gifts, but perhaps the greatest was simply this proof that love could conquer anything. That family was worth fighting for, and that happy endings were possible even after the darkest beginnings. And so the story closes, not with an ending but with a continuation. The Norris family living their lives, loving their children, working their land, and passing forward the values that had sustained them through generations. The story of Preston and Nora, forever remembered, forever cherished, forever an example of what two people could build when they chose each other and refused to let the world tear them apart. That child had his name. That woman had her partner. That love had its happily ever after. And that, in the end, is all that truly matters.